Anyway, to Sligo Rovers, because it's a really important moment of the day for me. Right, ladies and gentlemen, Frank Gannon.
Morning, everybody. I was just going to attend this like the rest of you, because I think the topic is an important one. Then Iggy, my neighbour and friend in Galway, called me and said, "Frank, are you going to this?" And I said, "I am. You might say a few words when the discussion gets going." I said, "Fine, no problem." And I arrived here and I've got a microphone on me. They've got slides ready to go. They've got 4 slides, one on research, one on industry, one on the university, one on collaboration. So they anticipate what I'm going to say, which is very impressive. And if I don't tell you that now and it happens to come up, it seems as if this is already up. I was also struck by the fact that I shouldn't have said yes, because I did miss the coffee and the croissants, and I wouldn't have if I'd been down there. And I also thought of Oscar Wilde's statement where he said, or George Bernard Shaw was it, I'm writing a long letter because I didn't have time to write a short one. So I haven't had my thoughts condensed into a few pithy points that will show up there. And yet, at the same time, I'm glad to have the opportunity to talk to you, because I think there is a need to bring this back, and Ollie raised the question there, into an Irish context. The generic questions are underlying the Irish ones and the way that we approach things. And I do believe that we have to think of ourselves as both an innovation capital, but perhaps more persuasively as an innovation hub for Europe. So there are different themes that have been floating through my mind when I was away from the BlackBerry at the back of the room and up here. And I'll just go through a few of them and make a few points along the way. I interjected earlier on about Ireland not really getting started into the area that is necessary for innovation to occur. And I'm defining innovation in a very broad sense, but the innovation which is at the more technically innovative level, because innovation is anything that is new and changed and increases productivity. But there is a need for people and skills. I think that was implied also with the Malaysia example, that they needed to get some things going there. Ireland needed to invest in that. We are investing in that. Science Foundation Ireland is one of the instruments for this. The universities and higher education institutes are other instruments. So there is a need and an awareness to do that. But there's an interesting flow. The university higher education intake is growing rapidly, and there's a proud boast that Ireland is second or third in Europe in terms of the number of students per capita. We're going up to 60% of those who could go to university under 30 are going to university, and that is going up to 72% is the goal, which of course is wonderful. It plays to the land of scholars, if not saints. But it does raise a question about how come we don't have the right number of people coming out at the other end. You hear software companies saying they don't find the people. You hear there aren't enough engineers. You hear whatever area you're in yourself. We don't have the right people coming out. I think that's daft that we're putting so many people through the education system at a lot of cost. See how clever they are? At a lot of cost. And that we don't have the people coming out at the other end. And I think that some intervention is needed there in order to match those two better. And there have been studies and studies. FIRFOS have got a library full of studies. Library queue, please. They have a library full of studies. That would allow them to tell you exactly what is needed, more or less. And there's a mismatch there. But we do need to have the time to grow the people, so we've got a baseline on which to build. And saying at this stage, maybe 10 years in, which is just about 2 projects worth in a laboratory, of that things aren't working or they're not working right, is like saying the kettle hasn't boiled yet, or that the cake isn't baked yet, and you've just put it in the oven. You have to have that little bit of time for that. So that's one point. People skills are needed if we want to make Ireland an innovation capital in Europe. The second thing is we need to have a culture change. And this works at many different levels. Again, in the areas of research, there was a huge, wonderful self-fulfilling culture which says, I'm going to do research, I'm going to have publications which will give me more money to do more research so that I have more publications. There was a little internal cycle, as if you didn't have you weren't in gear. And if you got more papers out, you got more money. I wrote an article once about the barriers towards translation in the medical context, and the analysis was that those who are doing the research that could give rise to the cure for cancer, and which would say, if we do this, we get the cure for cancer. They never do it because they have to get publications to get more money because it's a longer term object, and you don't get the translation happening. So there needed to be a change of culture, and Science Foundation Ireland, I think, has been an agent for change, and the colleges have been willing participants in this as well. There's been a massive change in how they've changed. So SFI has always said we need to have excellent research such that there's an impact on the economy and society. Internally, we've changed that. I was going to change it externally, but I was told you cannot change your mission statement too frequently. But the change would be, we're going to have an impact on the economy and society by doing excellent research. And there's a subtlety in that, which means that we know that our goal is really to have an impact on the economy and society, but through excellent research. And those two are, in my mind, indelibly linked. We get culture change in different ways. We brought in a system in 2007 when I joined of having a census. Everybody gets funding from us, gets asked questions. Ireland is a country of a small enough size that we can do that. We can have an immediate impact by asking questions. As pointed out, what you measure is what you get. So we asked, which industries are you working with? How often do you meet them? Do you have agreements in place, et cetera, et cetera? And people, of course, the first time might say no, and then they know we're coming back the next year and say, well, I better go and do something about it. And now there are over 400 companies working with the 500 research groups that we support in Ireland, which is quite different than the profile that you get in nearly any other country. We also asked them then, what EU grants have you applied for and which ones you were successful in? They'd stopped applying. Now they apply, et cetera, et cetera. So you can drive change in the culture by relatively small actions. Internally in SFI, and this was triggered by the comment about the willingness to take risk and to make mistakes. Internally, I introduced a system of what I called the wrong document. So I'd have a thought, I'd write a document, I'd rattle it out there, I wouldn't even bother correcting it too much, and I'd call it the wrong document. I'd go into management and say, I know there's lots of things wrong with this, but this is a good point to start with. And that's quite different and encourages them, and they now come occasionally with wrong documents themselves. They say, I haven't got all of this right, I can't get the perfection that goes from all the studies, but this is where we're going. And again, that drives to an agility and a willingness to change and not take things as they were. I think the biggest culture change that has to happen, however, is in the public service. And I'm talking a little bit more of the civil service than I'm a public servant as well, so of course I would exclude me and Tom and other people around here. But there is a need for the risk-taking component, the willingness to move forward dynamically rather than trying to get it so correct that you won't miss you on your promotion. And that is, I think, one of the largest structural problems we have in Ireland. We're not dynamic, and we don't want to be dynamic because we're afraid that we're going to lose something out. The system will hammer you. You'll be in the media if you make a mistake, if you make the wrong purchase. You're hammered. You're flawed forever. And I think that is a culture change that hasn't taken place yet. I think the third point is the context that Ireland is working in. There are a few different contexts, contexts maybe. Anyway, one is our size. We're only 4 or 5 million. We don't have a large enough market in which to drive our economy forward. We have to be export driven. We therefore have to be responsive to our customers, to take Ollie's point, that are around the world. And we have to be very darn good at doing that. We have to be very competitive. Now, competitive immediately sends up a bubble. That means lower salaries. Salaries is a component. It means energy costs have to be correct, and I don't understand why they go up sometimes when we want them to go down, but that's a different matter. And we also have to be competitive in terms of the skills-based innovative patterns that we're able to put in place such that this is a good place to do things, which goes back to the people, the skills, and the reputation that you build through the skills as this being a good place to do innovation, and the companies that come through here that start off from an idea and grow, that gives that message as well. So it's a mixture of the indigenous companies that have to be supported and the high-performance startup companies that get support from Enterprise Ireland. A lot is expected of them. Sleeping giants like the food industry need to really up their game to have more innovation because they're a major component in the system, and they are beginning to do that, but they've treated food as a commodity, and that has been commodity plus marketing is okay, but it's not really the best way to go about things. And we also have to be involved in the transformation of the multinationals that are here.